Rabbi.
Good evening and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Wonderful to see all of you. Welcome to Ahavat Shalom. I'm Rabbi Matt Berger, and I'm pleased to have all of you with us here in the sanctuary. And Shalom, hello to all of you who are watching the live stream from the comfort of your home. It's great to have you here with us as well. I'm joined on the Bima. It's been 3 weeks, but Allison Rosoff, our soloist, is back in her spot, and down at the piano is our accompanist, Joy Katzen-Guthrie. We invite you to join in as much as you can. You'll find the transliteration, the Hebrew and the English, on the slides before you, and in our prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, Dwelling Place of Prayer. And we're going to begin, if you'd like to open the prayer book, to page 10, where we'll find the words of Psalm 133, Hine Mato Umanaim, how good it is to be together. Hine Mato Umanaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad Hine Mato Umanaim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. How good it is to be together. How good it is to be together. Whoa, 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 whoa. Hine mato umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine mato umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. How good it is to be together. How good it is to be together. Whoa, 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 whoa. Gonna turn now to a beautiful song written by the late Debbie Friedman, Light These Lights, getting us ready for lighting the Shabbat candles.
Oh, hear my prayer, I sing to you. Be gracious to the ones I love, and bless them
Find the words for the bracha, blessing for candles, on page 2, keeping and remembering Shabbat. Holy One, we ask at this time that you give peace to the world, and peace especially in the Ukraine. Guard all of the families whose lives have been altered. Guard all the soldiers who are still trying to protect its independence due to this conflict. May their bodies, their homes, and their lands be once again protected and safe. Let us do our part to build a loving, just, and compassionate world speedily in our own day. As we say together, Amen. We're going to continue with the classic Shabbat table song, Shalom Aleichem, peace be to you, Malachim, messengers of the Most High. You'll find this prayer on page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Shalom, Shalom. Mi Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shalom, Shalom. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Shalom, Shalom. Mi Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shalom, Shalom. Peace be upon you, angels divine. Shabbat Shalom, umevorach, Malchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Shalom, Shalom. Mi Melech, Malachei Amlachim, HaKadosh Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Shalom, Shalom, Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shalom, 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 Shalom.
We'll continue with our segue to Shema and its blessings, the Chatzi or half Kaddish that you can find on page 26, Words of Praise.
Yitkadav, Yitkadav, Shmei Rabbah.
Amen.
Yamad Yivrach, Yurtei, Yamlik Malchutei, Mechayechon Uvyomechon, Uvchaye de Kol Beit Yisrael, Bagala, Bagala, Uvizman Kariv, Vimaru, Amen. Yishmei Rabbah Mevorach, Le'olam Olam Me'amaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, V'yishabach, V'yitba'ar, V'yiromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei Dekudesha Brichu, Le'elam Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tush Bechata V'nechemata, Damiran B'ama, V'maru, Amen.
Let's rise for the Barchu, the call to prayer. Continue together on page 31, Words for Creation, Ma'ariv Aravim. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way which tide and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. And on 33 words of love, Ahavat Olam. Wisdom and wonder, passion and instruction, story and symbol. All these things your Torah gives to us. And the more we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives. What could be a truer token of your abiding love than this holiest of your works and the living language that gives it form? Kata Adonai, Ohev Amo. First sing, open up our eyes before the Shema.
Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live, fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one, and we will know that you are one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivot Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Feel free to be seated and join us as we chant the words of the V'ahavta together, page 36. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shitecha b'beitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shokbecha uv'kumecha וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובישעריך, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Continue on 39, a prayer emet ve'emunah, which means truth and faith. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we are taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land. The winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. There is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together, and we'll be singing Hannah Tiferet's arrangement of Mi Chamocha. Thus it is said, Adonai redeemed Jacob from a hand stronger than his own. Praised are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. And we'll continue on 42 with our prayer for shelter and protection, the Hashkivenu.
Oh, guide my steps and help me find my way. I need your shelter now. Rock me in your arms and guide my steps and help me make this day a song of praise to you. Rock me in your arms and guide my steps, and guide my steps, and guide my steps. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom, Lishalom. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom, Lishalom. V'ha'amideinu shomereinu l'chaim, chaim. V'ha'amideinu shomereinu l'chaim, chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom, Lishalom. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu Lishalom, Lishalom. Oh, guide my steps. Oh, guide my steps. Oh, guide my steps.
The closing words of this beautiful prayer. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people, Israel, over Jerusalem and the entire world. So we say, Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukkot shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Let's rise now for our standing prayers, asking that God will open our lips to hear our prayers. Begin on page 46 and continue on even pages.
Adonai, sifatai tiftachu fi yagidai hilatecha. Eternal God, open my lips that my mouth may declare your glory. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, v'Elohei אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל, ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואמהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי יעקב, אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מחלל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומחייהם אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יעלוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Feel free to be seated after these initial prayers for the merit of the generations who came before us, for our lives and strength, and for holiness. We turn to Shabbat, and it's holiday day of plenty for all of us and day of rest. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. And a prayer that God's presence will always remain with us in Israel or wherever we may find ourselves. Baruch atah Adonai HaMachazir Shechinato Litzion. And our words of gratitude, called Hoda'ah in Hebrew, are found on page 59. Baruch atah Adonai Hatov Shimcha Ucha Na'eh Lechodot. And the tefillah always ends with Birkat Shalom, a blessing and a prayer for peace. So we read, grant abundant peace to Israel, your people, forever, for you're the sovereign God of all peace. May it be pleasing you to bless your people Israel in every season and moment with your peace. Blessed are you, Adonai, who blesses your people Israel and the world with peace. As we say, Baruch atah Adonai, Varech et amo Yisrael, B'Shalom. And going back right on page 60, we will now sing Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim. בשלומך. שלום רבה ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. שלום רב ישראל עמך תשים לעולם. תשים
Let's turn our hearts now to words and a prayer of healing. Mi Sheberach, God the one who blesses, which is found on page 253 in your prayer books or right on the screens before you. As we call to mind and to heart individuals in our community and beyond who are in need of healing at this time. We call to mind Chris Aldridge, Peter Bauk, Yonatan Reuven Ben Rivka, Charlie Burke, Babs Brown, Manuel Cruz, Eddie Deerfield, Evelyn Edelman, Rob Edelman, Harry Fleisch, John Friedman, Denise Freifeld, Mitchell Freifeld, Leah Gottlieb, Don Hirschman, Nick Martin, Arnold Miller, Melissa Miller, William Miller, Carl Nusanian, Michael Ranzino, Rabbi Avram Reifer, Abby Richmond, Stephanie Ross, Dennis Schulman, Jeff Stark, John Walsh, Sharon Worster, and Sophia Young. If there are any other names you'd like to add at this time, feel free.
My father, George Stark.
Mi sheberach avoteinu mikor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Long ago, when I was a rabbi in the Windy City, my wife Ida and I took a trip to Central Europe. They called it a rabbinic familiarization tour of Prague, Budapest, and Vienna. By far, our favorite city of the three was Prague. A, because it's really beautiful. B, it's blessed with fantastic architecture, like the 14th century Charles Bridge with its medieval stone arches. And then, of course, C, there's the connection between Prague and Franz Kafka, the great 20th century novelist and short story writer, best known as the author of The Metamorphosis. That'll leave you up at night. And D, finally, there's the exquisite Jewish Quarter, which features the Alt Now, which is the old new synagogue, a really cool clock right at the top of the old town hall that uses Hebrew letters and actually runs backwards. It's the only one that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And finally, in the Jewish Quarter, there is the legend of the Golem. That is the mythical creature created by the Maharal, or rabbi of Prague, created from clay, or the stuff of the earth. The Golem's mission was to protect the Jewish inhabitants of the Jewish Quarter, which in that day was a ghetto where every single night the gates closed and the Jews were locked in. So the Golem was the protector. It was an awesome trip overall, though I'd advise you to not necessarily travel in February because it's pretty much just as cold as Chicago. But there is one final point that I'd like to make about Prague. You see, right next to and overlooking the Jewish Quarter, there's a 4 or 5 story building. And throughout the communist period there, it served as the primary location that the KGB used to spy on the Jews of Prague, which is not so nice. Russia, to put it mildly, is not playing well in the sandbox these days. The horrific and totally unnecessary war in the Ukraine rests squarely on their shoulders. Its leader, Putin, is a modern-day Haman, if I've ever saw one. Apart from the humanitarian crisis and great loss of life on both sides, every single one of us is feeling the effects of the world, either at the pump or at the grocery store. And then there's the imprisonment of the American basketball star Brittany Griner, which happened just 1 week before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. She was jailed for carrying a minuscule amount of cannabis oil into Russia. Yesterday, sadly, we learned that Russia sentenced Ms. Griner to 9 years in prison, which, if anything, was expected, even though it's a sorry turn of events. You might ask yourself, why does a 2-time USA gold medalist in basketball and star for the Women's National Basketball Association's Seattle Storm need to play ball overseas? I can think of at least 3 reasons. First, the WNBA season is short, just 36 games, less than half of their male counterpart, the NBA. Basketball, by the way, was invented in the town that I was born, Springfield, Mass. Back then, in 1891, they used a peach basket with the bottom cut out for a rim and a hoop. Second, WNBA players make far less money than NBA's male players. The difference in salary is absolutely massive, well over $6 million a year difference in average salaries. This means that pretty much every WNBA pro basketball player needs to supplement their income. And finally, playing overseas in the off-season keeps their basketball skills razor sharp. The guilty verdict, we've learned, opens the door for a prisoner exchange between the U.S. and Russia. As we know, last week, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said Washington has already made a substantial proposal to Moscow to free Brittany Griner, as well as former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan. And earlier today, we learned that the country's top diplomats are ready to negotiate over Ms. Griner and Mr. Whelan's cases. Time will tell whether the offer will lead to the release of these American citizens. This is just the latest high-profile example of the U.S. trying to redeem a captive, which you should know is also a cardinal religious obligation of Judaism, called in Hebrew, Pidyon Shivuyim. No less an authority than the Talmud calls redeeming the captive or unjustly imprisoned a great mitzvah. Our sages viewed captivity as a fate even worse than starvation or death. Many centuries later, the 16th century legal code called the Set Table, or the Shulchan Aruch, goes even further. Redeeming the captive, they say, takes precedence over supporting the poor or even clothing them. There is no commandment more important than redeeming captives. Why? Because the unjustly imprisoned, whose very lives are in danger, are also likely hungry, thirsty, and lacking proper clothing. The usual remedy was for the Jewish community to pool their resources and pay the ransom necessary to free the captive. There were technically, according to Jewish law, limits in terms of the amount of money that could be spent for ransom, but in reality, the Jewish community always came through. Unfortunately, once it became known that Jews would go to great lengths to recover a kinsman, word spread quickly about the practice, to the point that Jewish parents are, even to this day, required to teach their kids how to swim. Not to be the next Mark Spitz, though I love that mustache, but to be able to jump ship if they are captured and swim to the nearest shore. I can only imagine the horror that Miss Griner has been experiencing for the past 5+ months. To be suddenly arrested and detained in Russia, a long-standing foe of the U.S., unable to speak or communicate in Russian, let alone read legal documents. And this being Russia, we know that they absolutely excel when it comes to harsh punishment. There's a reason that the word gulag still brings chills down many a person's spine. Her legal ordeal, in a way, also reminds me a bit of Franz Kafka, more specifically in his novel The Trial. Published just a year after his death, it tells the story of a guy named Joseph K., who was arrested and persecuted by a remote and inaccessible authority. Joseph never really learns the reason for his arrest, and neither do we as readers of the book. But given Franz Kafka's figurative love affair with the Russian author Dostoevsky, it's not a big stretch to think that the setting of the trial may well have taken place in Russia. Thankfully, there's a fairly recent example of freeing the captive that can give us hope regarding the cases of Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan. It also serves to bring the Jewish imperative to observe this great mitzvah to the fore. In 2009, Alan Gross was working as a U.S. government contractor in Havana, Cuba, which is both then and now communist. Mr. Groth lived in Potomac, Maryland before he went to Cuba, and now he's free. And as you might have guessed by his last name, he happens to be Jewish. Alan Gross spent over 1,800 days in captivity after being arrested and convicted on false charges brought by the Cuban authorities. But in 2014, he received a phone call while in prison that changed his life. His wife, Judy, who was talking to him, said, "Alan, we're never going to have to talk like this again." At that moment, Alan knew that his release would be imminent, and he arrived in the U.S. 2 days later. It happened to be the first day of Hanukkah, the Festival of Light. And in a short media statement, Mr. Gross noted, "Chag Sameach," He said, "Happy holiday." He considered it as nothing short of a Hanukkah miracle that his harrowing ordeal in Cuba was behind him. The U.S. State Department secured his release in exchange for 3 Cubans imprisoned for espionage. And just 3 years later, after Mr. Gross regained his freedom, he and his wife Judy made Aliyah to Israel, fulfilling a lifelong dream, and they lived in an apartment in Tel Aviv. Once it became known that Alan Gross was Jewish, the religious imperative of Pidyon Shiburim, redeeming the captive, sprang into action. To wit, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington, D.C., established a legal defense fund in 2013 for Jews held wrongfully because of their religion. And some of the funds were indeed used to help Alan Gross secure his freedom. This same commandment, redeeming the captive, is also played out from time to time in the state of Israel. But here, we're talking about repatriating captured Israeli soldiers, whether or not they're still living. When this happens, the Jewish state leaves absolutely no stone unturned to recover soldiers who were captured while serving in the Israel Defense Forces. Some of you may recall the ordeal of Sergeant First Class Gilad Shalit, who in 2006 was held captive for 5 years in horrendous conditions by Palestinian militants after a cross-border raid using an underground tunnel. Hamas only agreed to release him in exchange for 1,027 Palestinian prisoners, some of whom were convicted of multiple counts of murder, as well as carrying out Israeli terror attacks. For this reason, the practice of redeeming the captive remains very controversial in Israel, as there are cogent arguments both for and against this practice. I truly hope and pray that Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan will soon be free. A 9-year sentence for Ms. Griner in a Russian penal colony for bringing a tiny amount of cannabis oil into the country is seriously disproportionate to the offense. Of course, any prisoner exchange with Russia will mean that the U.S. will need to free some very unsavory characters. But in the end, I believe that it's certainly worth the risk. The underlying values of solidarity and the infinite worth of every individual's life are part of the very DNA of Jewish tradition. It found its way into Zionist thought and now in the state of Israel. I'd like to believe that we cherish these values here in the U.S. just as well. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to continue on page 282, words of the Aleinu, the adoration. Please rise as the ark is opened.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'tik gedula leotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kiglayei haratzot, velo samanu kamishbechot hadama, shelo sam kelkinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, ve'anaknu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei nelech malchei hamlachim akadosh baruch
You'll find the words of Mourner's Kaddish, words of praise, Kaddish Tome, on page 294 of your prayer books. So we call to mind and to heart families who are in the period of Shloshim, the first 30 days mourning their loved one. As we fondly remember Sylvia Eisner, mother of Tammy Wolf, our religious school director, and Stu Moravsky, father of Lisa Richmond. And we mark the yahrzeit anniversary of passing of the following loved ones on this Shabbat, as we remember Richard Brindis, Morris A. Fischelo, Bobby Gordon, Rose Hadberg, Robert Hulk, Milton Kander, Samuel Klein, Bonnie Kligerman, Eugene Kligman, Howard Landis, Sheldon Lewis, Rhoda Lowe, Sarah Matashek, Hannah Robins, Sam Sandler, Rose Sapphire, George Schwartzstein, Robert Turner, Irving Toodleman, Bernard Watchell, John J. Walsh Jr., Shirley Weingarten, and David Weiss. Are there any other names to add for yahrzeit on the Shabbat? We say, Zichronam Livracha, may the memories of these good people continue to be a blessing in their loved ones' lives as we rise together offering the words of Kaddish praise. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yamad yivrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agalav b'zman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehi shmei rabba mivarach le'alam u'lamei al-maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudashah b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, ta'amiran v'yalma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'asei shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. May the one who causes peace in the heavens cause peace to descend on us, Israel, and throughout the world, to which we say, amen.
V'imiru, 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 amen. V'imiru, 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 amen.
Feel free to be seated. My pleasure to call forward Michelle Koningsberg, our assistant soloist, to join us in leading the Kiddush. You'll find the Kiddush blessing on page 5, as well as on the screen before you for the fruit of the vine.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, B'ahavu v'ratzon hilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishi, ki hu yom tehillah l'mikrahei kodesh, zecher l'tziat mitzrayim, ki banu v'charta piltanu kidashta
Thank you so much, Michelle. Why don't you stay up here for the motzi as well? And we'll bring this into the Oneg Shabbat after the service. Join us in the motzi.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Big tailbone, enjoy. And guess what? Michelle's dad, Steve Koningsberg, is here. He's representing our temple leadership this evening. He's going to share some Shabbat announcements with you all. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom. Many thanks to Rabbi Matt, Allison, Joy for a beautiful service, along with our tech crew, Bruce Lowett and Ed Marks. Sisterhood's Honey fundraiser for the high holidays is underway. Let's bring some sweetness to the Jewish New Year. Please RSVP for Sisterhood's in-person Israeli and Moroccan cooking program on September 6th. Sisterhood is sponsoring a parent cafe on August 21st, the opening day for religious school. Please check your mailboxes for the Brotherhood's annual Rosh Hashanah gram forms. You can add your name to a beautiful Rosh Hashanah card sent to all Temple members. The next meeting of the Temple Book Club will be on Sunday, August 28th at 10:30 a.m. A bagel breakfast will be served. This year's Jewish Community Day with the Rays will be on August 14th at Tropicana Field. Gulf Coast JFCS Fall Food Drive has begun and will continue through September. Info and links about these events can be found on our weekly happenings email. Following the services, please join us for an oneg in the social hall. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Steve. And our closing song, you can catch it right on the screens, or it shows up in various places. 62 would be one of them. Our prayer for peace, Oseh Shalom.
Shalom bimroma, uyaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimroma, uyaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu.
our health and well-being. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al shmirat hanefesh, for the mitzvah and sacred obligation to protect our lives and the lives of those in our community as well. Shabbat Shalom, one and all, both here in the sanctuary. Join us in the Oneg, and those of you back home. It's been wonderful having you pray with us.